All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Leveraging AI and Program Assessment. I'm Diana Jernigan-Breedy, and I'm joined by my amazing colleague, Krista Emma. We're Educational Effectiveness Specialists here in the Office of Educational Effectiveness. So we wouldn't be OE if we didn't have a few objectives in the next 25 minutes. We're hoping that you will be able to identify some strategies to use AI to enhance your program assessment processes. We want you to evaluate the benefits and risks of using AI in assessment, and then we'll review some AI prompts to revise your program learning objectives and assessment plans. So we're going to briefly get into what is artificial intelligence, Krista.
Yeah, so I'm sure most of you have played around with AI here or there. We thought it would be fun to ask ChatGPT to tell us how it would define itself. So this was the text that we got back. You can see some of the keywords we highlighted is that it's a program that generates human-like text based on the prompts that you give it. It uses patterns to predict and create novel responses, and it works to mimic natural language in the way that a human might respond. So just to get kind of a sense of how everyone has been using AI so far, we've got a very quick poll. If you could scan the QR code, or you can go to menti.com and enter that code at the bottom, just to get a sense of if and how you're using AI in your work. And I'll pull up the actual Mentimeter screen as well. And I know we've got a few people still joining the Zoom, so we'll give them a minute to get caught up. That QR code, again, is right on the left-hand side.
All right, so we see it's pretty split. You know, there's some who are using it all the time, and then there's some who never use it at all. But I just want to show you some types of AI. We have one called narrow artificial intelligence, and they perform specific narrowly defined tasks. They're trained to use large amounts of data and machine learning algorithms, and they have predefined programming parameters. So you'll see on your phone when you have autocorrect, you'll see it in some assistive technology where it's speech to text, where you can talk and then it'll type out what you're saying. You see it with Siri and Alexa. You see it in Netflix when you are streaming movies and it tells you you might be interested in the next 5 movies or shows based on what you've been watching. Your spam email filters, and my favorite is Waymo. So this is not out here in New York. Waymo is out west, and it's literally Uber and Lyft. And you know, you will put in that you need a taxi. This taxi comes, but there's no driver in the front. It already has, so it's all AI powered, and it gets you to your destination. So it's very similar to Lyft and Uber. It's just that there's no person to drive. And then we have what we are very familiar with calling AI, which is artificial generative intelligence. So it's considered like the holy grail because now you're putting almost a face or a human being and human features to technology, right? It's trained on massive data sets and large language models so that it sounds very natural in text, or at least as natural as possible. It can make decisions based on complex reasoning, and it's constantly producing some new content, novel content. So 3 of the most popular platforms are OpenAI or ChatGPT, Google has Gemini, and Microsoft has Copilot. Everyone kind of has a platform that they prefer. It's kind of like Samsung and Apple, like Droid versus Apple. But you tend to find one that you like and that you tend to work on more. So for me and for a lot of this presentation, it will be ChatGPT, OpenAI.
Okay, and you may have seen this email go out in the last week or so. We just wanted to share it. It's from our internal security training and awareness working group, just to be aware of, that AI is a tool, not to trust it entirely just yet, as it is still an emerging technology, and be aware of how the data that you enter may be used. So keep in mind that if you're using a free version, that information is not necessarily confidential. It could be used for future training purposes for that AI program. And just be wary of what you're actually providing. Make sure that any of the information that you're giving is not sensitive data. So if you're uploading, internal information, make sure it is de-identified. Do your best not to upload entire, data sets or documents unless it's something that you would be perfectly willing to share on a public-facing website. So just be wary of that, and then know that AI is still sort of sorting itself out. So you may get to, enter a prompt where the responses don't really make sense anymore. The AI does hallucinate. So if that happens, I would recommend closing out of that thread and starting over with a new prompt.
All right, so AI in higher education assessment, and the reason why we use it is, really for three reasons: speed, accuracy, and scalability. So with speed, we're talking about efficiency. We want to automate data analysis with almost instant feedback. Anyone that has done any of these platforms, you're sometimes shocked by how quickly you get those responses back. Data-driven decisions, so you can enhance your assessment accuracy and reduce human error. And in faculty insights, you can always process large data sets with an ability to produce longitudinal analysis. So if you've got data over a couple of years, you've got spreadsheets over a couple of years with a lot of information, you can upload that, and now you're going to be able to see trends in your data. So practical applications, we just have this graph here. You want to identify your pain points or what you really need a lot of information on, right? What do you want to work on? And then based on that, craft a prompt based on your desired output. So even if it's just ideas that you have that you kind of want the output to be, throw it into the prompt, right? And then a lot of it's going to be based on the feedback or the output. Then you're doing your refining to say, well, yeah, you're starting well, this is a good start, but I need you to add X, Y, and Z. And that's how you're going to get the feedback to be exactly what you want it to be.
All right, so I know, like we've said, we've been playing in AI and exploring what it can be used for. And today we're going to try and talk about how we could apply this technology to the program assessment process and your annual academic program reports. So in case you haven't completed this before, if you're a non-academic unit or you're just getting started with the assessment process, a quick refresh. Some of the pieces of that assessment report would be your program goals, learning objectives, your assessment methods, setting benchmarks, and then using those results for actions and improvements. If you're interested in checking out that assessment report, we've linked it there as well, so you can kind of use that as a guide.
All right, so I'll start with.
Go ahead, Dan.
I'm sorry. You go.
All right, so our first example, starting off pretty basic, is how can we use AI to improve program learning objectives, or PLOs? The PLOs are really the foundational piece of any good assessment plan. So you want to make sure that you've got a PLO that is measurable, that is specific, and that is actionable. So let's say you're starting off with a PLO that reads something like, students should have strong written communication skills. Now, that's not so bad. It's a good PLO, to incorporate. We're always trying to improve students' written communication skills, but it's a little subjective, right? What exactly do we mean by strong? What does that mean for your specific discipline? How will you go about actually assessing that? So we would consult with, let's say, ChatGPT to say, revise this PLO to make it more specific, measurable, and aligned with Bloom's taxonomy. You could choose a different taxonomy if you're interested, but Bloom's is always sort of our go-to. And then you might see something like this as the result. So the revised PLO would read, students will produce written communication that demonstrates clarity, coherence, and appropriate style for professional and academic contexts. So that right there gives you a little bit more of actionable criteria, maybe stuff that you could put into a rubric and expand upon a little further when you actually go to measure students' ability in that area.
All right, thanks. So now we're going to talk about the assessment methods. It's the second part on the template. So the original method, it says assess student writing through essays and reports. What we did, we threw it into a prompt and we asked it to revise the original assessment method so it best aligns with the PLO that we just spoke about. So the revised method assesses student writing through the final capstone project and is evaluated using a rubric. So the difference between the original and the revised: one, we've narrowed down the writing tool. So it's not just essays and reports. We're narrowing it down to the final capstone project. And we're also letting the students know how they're going to be evaluated, which would be through using a rubric. So here we have improving the benchmark. So the original benchmark, students should be able to demonstrate proficiency in written communication. But it's a little unclear what that actual proficiency is. So we put in the prompt, revise the following benchmark to make it more specific and measurable. That's the first part. Focus on making the benchmark clearer in terms of what students will demonstrate and at what level. And then you want to include criteria for the different levels of proficiency. This is kind of going back and tying this to a rubric. So it's 80% of students will score at least proficient, which is now defined as 4 out of 5 on a rubric, in areas such as argument structure, coherence, and grammar. So any student reading this now knows what they need to do to at least be considered proficient on the assessment method.
Okay, and then just one more example that would relate back to that program assessment plan. We do ask you to say, how are you going to use these results to improve your program or the student experience? So maybe, your original response would be faculty are going to give students feedback, right? They're going to talk about their writing quality in class. Now that's a great, idea in theory, but give us a little bit more detail, right? So let's talk to AI and see, what do they suggest? Based on the PLO, the method we identified, and the benchmark we created, create at least 2 improvement-oriented and actionable items for the next steps. So you can see this is really specific language that's really narrowing down for the AI program to fit back exactly what we want. And then you've got something like, maybe we could offer optional but strongly encouraged writing workshops that target key areas of improvement, maybe things that were identified on your rubric as lacking. Maybe that's referring students to our own SBU Writing Center. Or maybe it's scaffolding your assignments so that you're letting students practice that skill throughout the term. So instead of just submitting that final capstone or that final written term paper, whatever it might be, you're going to actually implement a weekly written reflection, whether that's a journal or some other assignment, where students can practice that skill and self-assess as they go and benefit from your feedback along the way.
Now we're going to use AI to draft or improve a curriculum map. So the curriculum map really guides the coursework for every one of the majors in the programs. So here's a basic one that was created using this prompt. So it's just create a curriculum map based on the following courses and show when the course topics are introduced, reinforced, and mastered. So it gave me exactly what I put in there, but it doesn't give me a whole lot to work with. I don't know when these courses are going to be assessed. I don't know when they're introduced. I don't know when they're reinforced. And I don't know when they're really mastered more than what it's saying here. It's just like one word, and that's it. So we revised the prompt so we get a little bit more for our curriculum map. This time, this took a little play to get us to this point, but it was revise the curriculum map using a combined syllabi from this program. So what happens is we had asked the instructors, give us all your syllabi. We then combined them onto one document and then uploaded that to ChatGPT along with the program's current program learning objectives. And then we asked it to create a curriculum map with the course and course numbers listed on the y-axis and the PLOs aligned to Bloom's taxonomy on the x-axis. And we wanted the output to be in grid form so we can easily see where courses are introduced, reinforced, mastered, and assessed. So this is a lot more wordier, but it gives us a little bit more when it comes to the curriculum map. So here's the revised output from ChatGPT. It lines our PLOs on the top. You see the courses on the side, and then it lets me know when those courses are introduced based on the PLO, when they're reinforced, when they're mastered, and when they are assessed. So for this one, it's not perfect because we see that they're only assessing in, and this is all fake data. This is not a real program. So I don't want to say that we're using anyone's information. But this was just showing that it's all assessed in the 499, right? It's not assessed anywhere else. Now, the program could be assessing, but from what we could see in the syllabi, it was only in that one area. So this is a really good discussion piece to bring to your department or to your curriculum meetings to just discuss where these programs are in relation to the PLOs. All right, so now we're going to use this AI for analyzing survey data. So a lot of times if you're having focus groups or if you're doing interviews, you're going to have a lot of qualitative data. And if anyone has done this before, you know, you normally go through these 4 steps. So you would have read through the transcripts, you would have gotten familiar with the data, you're coming up with coding and themes, like repeated themes that you're seeing in those transcripts. You're searching for patterns and connections, and then you're figuring out how to interpret the data. However, what you can do with AI is, and this was a list of different prompts, ChatGPT prompts, to analyze qualitative data. So pick one that works for you. So I like the ones like number 10 that look for patterns or connections between different themes or sub-themes. I also like to do number 4, identify key phrases or words that capture the essence of each theme. So I'm using these questions to help build out what's really going on in during those transcripts, right? During the focus groups and during those interviews, what's really going on. So based on the prompt, this one is here, define the most important themes that emerge from the student feedback. For each theme, identify key phrases or words that capture its essence, and then summarize the overall student sentiment related to that theme. This came back in, I think it was 4 seconds. So what normally would have taken me at least, an hour or 2 of going through information, I now am getting information back in record time, right? So it gives me one of the themes, which was creative freedom and expression. This was feedback from art students. Key phrases that came out from what they were speaking about, and then a summary of the key phrases and some other notable components from the feedback from the focus groups and the interviews. So all this in relatively no time flat. So we've shown some ways to work with AI. We wanted you to start with your pain points and have a vision of what you want the output to resemble. Include very clear instructions in your prompts. The more clear, the better you put in, the better you get out. So the clearer your prompts can be, I think you'll be happier with the output. If you can provide context and exemplars, you'll once again have stronger output. So if there's a website, if there's a study, if there's anything that you're thinking, wow, this is really good, I wish I could replicate that, put those exemplars into your output, into your AI prompt, and then you're going to get back what you're trying to put in. So if there's something you're trying to mirror, do that with the exemplars. You're going to review and revise constantly, and then, as always, you want to have faculty input. So with these curriculum maps in particular, a lot of times there's one person doing it, thinks this is amazing, and then when they bring it back to the team, it's like, I don't know. If you can have some of that input from the beginning, then you're not doing this work over and over and over again. Like get as many people who are actually doing this work and heavily involved in the work, involved from the beginning. And then it makes your life a little bit easier as you're going through to get this to be exactly what you want it to be.
Yeah, and I just wanted to jump in to add something that came up during our, when we did this session earlier this week in person, or last week rather, is, not everyone's super comfortable using AI just yet, and that's okay. I think it's a technology that's still going to have a lot of things to work out as we move forward. As an institution, we haven't, formally adopted a platform or a policy. So I think our point here today is don't be afraid of it, but use it with caution, right? It's probably not going anywhere, so it's to our advantage to start working it into some of our processes and leverage it as a tool, but it's just that, it's a tool. We still want to make sure that we're circulating it, whatever it results in, the data or the language that it provides you with, to your faculty and staff, and then sort of checking it and saying, is this reflective of who we are, what we were trying to do? And then one cool resource that we found as we were, kind of doing some research for this session was an AI gallery that's out of Northeastern University. So you see there's a couple of screenshots here of different ways that faculty are using AI in the curriculum. So that's linked there if you want to check that out and kind of see how folks are using it over there. And then Diana's got a few resources she wanted to recommend as well.
Right, so we talked about the AI Gallery at Northeastern. I want to talk about two people who are really leading the AI and assessment field, which would be Bowen and Watson. They really take the whole idea of teaching with AI as to one, yes, leverage it, but to also incorporate hands-on experiences and experiential learning opportunities for students so that every assignment you're doing should have some kind of AI component so that students can see what this looks like in real time and possibly solve real world problems when they're doing their work. I also want to highlight Dr. Amy Cohen, who's in CELT, who did an excellent presentation on generative AI in higher ed. She did a deep dive into assessment redesign. It was about 2 weeks ago, so there's a link to her work there. And then this one is Kerbin and Sahin. They talk about the impact of ChatGPT on higher education. So we have these resources here. There's going to be many more that we're going to start posting, but this is a good start to how to leverage it in program assessment.
So I know we've been talking for a while, and we're sure you guys have questions or want to talk through how this information might be applied to your program assessment plan. So the rest of this time is yours. What questions do you have, if any? I know it's Monday still, so we'll let you off the hook. But if anyone does have questions after the fact or want to talk through how you might use AI for your own specific program assessment, please feel free to reach out to us. We are always available for one-on-one or small group consultations. And then, of course, we wanted to remind you, if you have not yet registered for our assessment symposium, it's coming up at the end of the month on October 30th. Registration is open through Wednesday of this week, and our keynote speaker actually has some really interesting ideas on AI and its impact on assessment. He has an Inside Higher Ed article that we've linked to. Diana, did you want to give a little overview of his work?
Well, yes, he talks about how assessment is broken and that AI did it. But for him, it's really taking a step back. Are we really assessing what we think we're assessing, or are we assessing AI? And so he really talks about starting with problems that you're having and then figuring out how AI can leverage some of that with some solutions in the afternoon. So I'm very excited to have him come, and I hope you will join us there.
And then last but not least, thank you for joining some of our workshops along the way. We've got a few more lined up for the rest of the semester, so please feel free to register if you're available. And otherwise, thank you all so much for joining us. We'll let you have a few minutes back in your day.